Kennedy, but if that were to come to pass, I mean, I hope he fights this thing. They're talking about radiation and chemo. I hope he fights this like hell, to be honest with you. But, Steve, if the time comes when Kennedy leaves the Senate, is the Senate less liberal, Steve Moore?
I think it is because, look, I don't agree with Ted Kennedy's politics, but I agree with Bob Shrum. When you look over the last 30 years, Larry, who's been a more effective senator? I can't think of a single person who's had a more of an impact on the United States Senate. And Bob Shrum is right. Most of the liberal legislation that has passed the United States Congress over the last 30 years has Ted Kennedy's imprint in it. I wish we had more conservatives who had to fight like Ted Kennedy.
Jared Bernstein, I'm sure you had something to do with Senator Kennedy as you're up there trolling around the Hill trying to overturn supply-side economics and nationalize health care, and I say that in good fun because I love you. What's your take on this story, Jared?
Look, can I tell one great Ted Kennedy story that I think will really resonate? So we're up on the Hill, we're giving a talk about something, and I'm a young, buck at that point, really nervous. Hillary Clinton's on the panel when she was First Lady. I think we had Alexis Herman, Ted Kennedy. So I get up, I read every single word of my speech, every comma. Hillary Clinton, First Lady, does the exact same thing, reads her speech word for word. Same thing Alexis Herman, who was the Labor Secretary. Ted Kennedy gets up. He has no pieces of paper. He brushes the podium aside and starts talking to the people and gave the most uplifting speech of the day, and it was one that he didn't look at one note, and it wasn't just rhetoric, it was a bunch of facts too. I mean, there is almost nobody up on Capitol Hill who knows as much about certain aspects of this economy as Ted Kennedy. Pensions, Social Security, wage structure, health insurance, it's such a font of knowledge. It is a tremendous loss.
Let me go to
if he doesn't make it back to the Senate floor.
All right, I appreciate that very much. Dan Clifton, I'm going to get to you after the break. I want to talk about what this election is going to mean for stocks. InTrade shows Obama as the big favorite to defeat McCain. The polls on Real Clear Politics show it closer. We're going to come to that in a minute. But, Dan, just pick up on the Kennedy story. Is there anybody remotely in the Republican side, who could stand up to Ted Kennedy?
Absolutely not. I mean, the idea that he is unreplaceable is a very true statement. What I would say is that there's an interesting parallel going on. Kennedy took the presidential election to the convention in 1980. You see Hillary Clinton doing that now. I think if Hillary Clinton loses this election, she could be the next Ted Kennedy. She starts a little bit later in life, but she can devote her life to becoming the most liberal lion in the Senate and be able to fight for all.
Can I make one point about that? There's a thing about Ted Kennedy that's really worth appreciating tonight. Circa 1985, Ted Kennedy decided, you know what? I don't want to be president. I'm going to be a senator for the rest of my life, and that's what he's applied himself to. I'm not sure too many other folks up there can say that.
No, that's a fair point. But Keith Boykin, what Dan Clifton said is very interesting because there is a parallel here. Look, Kennedy took it all the way to the convention against Jimmy Carter. Kennedy made a heck of a fight. A lot of people thought he wouldn't because of various things, Chappaquiddick and so forth, but he did. It was a very spirited fight. Now, that, of course, hopelessly divided the Democrats and helped. It helped Ronald Reagan. I don't think it was the reason Reagan won, because there's so many problems out there and people look to Reagan for big changes. But it certainly helped. Now, as long as Hillary Clinton uses the Senator Ted Kennedy model and fighting right through, maybe she'll take this to the convention, Keith Boykin. I know you don't want to hear that, but there is a possible historical parallel here.
I don't see the historical parallel at all, Larry. I mean, Ted Kennedy was fighting against an incumbent president in 1980. That's not the case here. Barack Obama is going to be the Democratic nominee more than likely, and Hillary Clinton is not going to fight to the convention. She's going to give up in the next 2 weeks, I'm sure of that, because she's smart enough to know that her future depends on it. And thirdly, quite frankly, the dynamics of the country have changed from 1980 to 2008. 81% of the public is against the direction of the country right now. They don't think we're heading in the right direction.
But they were then. They were then.
Well, yeah, but at that time we had a Democratic incumbent.
Totally now against what was going on.
We had a Democrat incumbent last time. Now we have a Republican incumbent. And people are
Jerry Bowyer, help me on this historical metaphor. No two periods are ever exactly alike, Jerry, but there are some interesting parallels here.
Right.
And the Kennedy fighting spirit, I don't know, Mrs. Clinton sounds like she's going to fight this thing for as long as she possibly can. How do you read it?
Yeah, Mark Twain says history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And this does sort of rhyme with 1980. It's the same theme. it's a divided Democratic Party. Keith Boykin may not want to see it. It may be an unpleasant reality or an inconvenient truth to him, but we have a severely divided Democratic Party. I mean, you have to be whistling past the graveyard not to see how divided this Democratic Party is. And we're going to see it tonight as we've seen it in every other major party.
That's way off. No, I'm sorry, Jerry. That's really, you know, there's this myth. There's this myth that somehow people who supported Hillary Clinton aren't going to support Barack Obama in the general election. That's
in the
pure
polls.
Nuts.
It's not a myth. It's in the polls. We're looking at 20. We're looking at polls to say something.
Well,
20%.
we will have a chance to revisit that debate, Jerry. I'll remind you of that point.
Go ahead, Clinton, out there in the left coast.
These things don't happen in a vacuum, and McCain's the nominee. All the conservative favorites faded away. The Republicans can't seem to win a single congressional by-election anywhere.
Exactly.
You want a party in trouble right now, look to the Republicans.
Clinton, you've got to admit one thing. It's a pretty big embarrassment when the presumptive Democratic nominee is getting less than 40% in a lot of these states.
No, it's not the same.
Hang on. We got a big crowd. We got a lot more to do. I got to take commercial break as we are a profit-maximizing television